So thank you everyone for coming out this grey morning. Actually, despite the title of this panel, I think we were, in our discussions earlier, all agreed that actually I don't think there are any cons to alternative languages in school and sort of raising bilingual or multilingual children. So what we're going to do is focus on what are the advantages of that, and what's the best way to help raise a bilingual or multilingual child in Hong Kong. So jumping right in, Wiebke, can we start with you? What would you say are the benefits then of raising a bi or multilingual child, whether in terms of cognitive skills or just social skills?
Well, there are many aspects.
Oh, you might.
Is it on? It is now.
Okay, so I think there are many aspects to this and lots of advantages. So when we look at the skills that students develop regarding their languages, of course they are enabled to communicate with people from different backgrounds, right? And I think this is also important regarding the social skills, as you are able to interact with people from many backgrounds. So these are competencies that they learn via learning a language. And regarding the cognitive skills, actually I'd like to quote a study conducted by a German university. They found out that students who are educated bilingually actually also have better skills or abilities in maths. So their results in maths tests are actually better because their brain is used to switching between different languages. And I think this is quite an interesting aspect also to consider.
Yes, I'll just add in, I mean, you've raised some really great points. I think that something else, obviously the first thing that stands out to us is that if you can speak many languages, you're opening up different opportunities for the world ahead. I'm going to jump onto something that's a little bit different, and I think quite relevant to us here in Hong Kong, is that there's been some research done that in the year 2100, 98% of languages that exist today won't exist anymore. And I think what is so important about that is that language is not only a language, language incorporates culture as well. So what we're saying is that the future, without those languages, is a world without the depth and the richness of the diverse culture that we have now. So we can see that around the world you've got English, Mandarin, probably Indonesian, French, Spanish, some of these big languages that are developing. But what about all the small languages? Now I know that we've got some of our colleagues here from, for example, the Korean International School, where I'm not an expert in Korean, but I do know that something small from that culture might be, they don't necessarily use words such as my, they would use our, because as a collective in their culture, if I'm correct, that they value the wider community more than the individual person. So I'm really running down this aspect of, for all of us here, and I know for us at YCIS, is that we want to value all of the Chinese culture. We want to value all of the Western culture. We don't want to lose culture, and language is so important in culture.
Sorry.
Shall I go next?
Yeah, by all means.
My name is Chadwick. I am the principal of the Korean International School, and I've been there 5 years. I've been in Hong Kong for 20 years. My children grew up here. They went to schools where they learned English and Chinese. So being bilingual, they are bilingual. They've had that experience of having lessons. My son wasn't so good. He struggled with putonghua. My daughters were great and they really enjoyed it. My eldest daughter actually wanted to go on and study French. So she had the opportunity for English, Chinese and French. But in the end, she decided to study psychology. So there's a big difference. So I personally believe, as a father and as a principal, that children having languages, learning other languages, is brilliant, and for the future. It opened doors for university. It really did open the doors for university, because it showed that she was a global citizen. She was someone who'd lived around the world, had experienced many, many different cultures, and had that globalness, the internationalness that appealed to the university assessors. The way we operate in school is that we offer many languages, and we start them young. We start very young, so age 4. When I was at school, which is a long time ago, you were all not even thought about then, is that in the UK, you didn't have a foreign language until you were started year 7. Right, so that was the first time I had any exposure to a foreign language. So I'm determined as principal to make sure that the young children in school have exposure to languages, and we give them exposure to 4 languages.
Okay. Simon, do you want to round things up?
Same question, I'll move on.
No, same
question. Similar to Chris, or slightly differently, I was born in Hong Kong, but I grew up in the UK, and then 32 years ago, I came back to work here, and I've been here ever since. So exactly like the others are saying, yeah, I'm only 6. I was only 6. No. So I think really just to pull together what everybody else has said is from my own experience as an educator, but also having children who've been brought up in what is an amazing international city, is yes, all the cognitive stuff is there, all the cultural appreciation is there, and I think it breeds a really strong level of self-confidence that I fit in. I can fit in anywhere, because I understand that people don't necessarily use my language, but I know a few and they know a few, and you have that sort of mutual understanding that languages and the opportunities that it can bring are huge. And as I say, my 2 children are now at university elsewhere, not in Hong Kong right now, and I don't think they ever get into a situation, be it social or academic, where they don't feel that they can contribute, because they have that inner confidence and just awareness of what they've experienced through their life. And I think the language is part of that, but I think culture is another part, and I think self-esteem and all of those things bring it together.
Great. I should have pointed out earlier that the last 15 minutes we will take questions from the audience, so keep anything you have in mind and we'll try to get the panel to answer it later. But I know all 4 of you come from very different schools, teaching different languages. So what role does the school play in helping to raise children bilingually or multilingually?
Sure. Obviously, I'm English, born in Hong Kong, and I'm running the Japanese international school. So careers have crazy directions sometimes. But the interesting thing really is, particularly for our school, is that, of course, we have an element of Japanese heritage. So our building has a Japanese primary school in it and an international primary school in it. So obviously, we have in the international school a lot of children who are learning in English, but are studying Mandarin or Japanese. And upstairs, we have a whole school of children who are Japanese speaking, who are learning English. So there's a mutual sort of, appreciation and use of that. I've just forgotten the question, Douglas.
Oh, about what role does school play?
What role does school play? Okay. No, I think the most important thing is, for example, no, we cannot, we have, I think, about 26 different passports on the school roll, and that right now we have Russians, we have all sorts of Italians, we have French, we have Germans, we have Indonesians. So we know that we cannot teach through all of those different languages. But what we actually do teach is an understanding and a respect for language. So for example, our library, which is a mainly English-speaking section library, has a very large multilingual section. All right. So, for example, all you actually need to do is contact some parents and say, do you have any spare books in your home language? And we'll put them in our library. So when those children go to the library, they know that their language is in that library and it matters. And I think really raising the profile to make sure that language is important, using different languages is an advantage, not a disadvantage. And literally, I suppose the school pushes that agenda that it's important and it's valuable and we can use it.
Thank you. So I would echo what Simon was saying. How do we, as a Korean international school, take a part in the role of languages? We do the same. Our library has all 4 language books in it. We have assemblies that are conducted partly in the language. So, for example, Korean. So when we have a music assembly, we sing songs in Korean, Chinese, and English. and to develop the appreciation of language, but also the usability of the language. And singing songs in the language helps with the expression of the language. So we do that a lot. And we have after-school clubs in languages as well. So our role is, as Simon says, the appreciation. For us also, we develop the cultural part slightly more. So everybody learns Korean. Everybody understands Korean special days to celebrate. Everybody understands and has a go at Taekwondo. Everybody understands that they have a go at singing Korean songs. And our Korean teachers do a great job in assemblies of explaining the flag. Why do we have a Korean flag in our school? What does it mean? How is it based on family? And so on and so on. So it's an inculcation of many things. As a school, we feel responsible that we should open up about languages. Our Chinese teachers do the same about Chinese. And our Spanish teachers, they sing and dance and play on the stage, and everybody loves them, and so it picks up the motivation for Spanish. Okay, so thank you very much.
Yes, many things have already been mentioned. I would like, but maybe I can add a few. So what we do at German Swiss is that we, of course, in our normal German curriculum, and I'm speaking for the German international stream here, we do have already 3 languages that are compulsory, and we can, students can also do ECAs in other languages. So we have a wide range of languages on offer. And what we also do is we teach a few subjects bilingually or even in English only, whereas the general language of instruction is German. So, for example, in our secondary department, we have biology and history, which is being taught bilingually, and geography, which is being taught in English only. And this is our approach of, even on top of the normal language classes, we offer even more opportunities for the students to use the other language and then become bilingual when they graduate. The latest, maybe even before. Yes, and then also, of course, at an international school, a library should also be international. Of course, we have books and other materials in different languages, mostly in English and in German, but also in French, for example. I think that is very important to offer reading materials for everyone. And what we also do is we invite speakers from, as long as we could at least, to come to our school and speak in their language. So we did have German-speaking guests there, and they did their talks for the whole school. So not only for the German stream, also for the English stream. We often have these kinds of events that happen cross-stream. So we try to, have this interaction between all the different parts of our community. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll wrap it up. Because I think that they've made some really valuable points. And I think the first thing that stands out is that, and I'll use Chris's example from earlier. He said that when he was in the UK, that he only started learning a foreign language at the age of 7, right?
Year 7.
Year 7.
12 years old.
12 years old.
So I know something that's quite common in Hong Kong is that a lot of families will send their children to schools and ECE, primary school. By the time you get to secondary school, you're probably looking for Canada or the UK. That's quite common, right? A lot of families send their children over. And something that has started coming out in recent research is that children that end up in these countries, those countries are largely a mother tongue speaking country, where a child arrives in there and they might have the right accent, they might have spoken language, and the teachers think they got the accent, a native speaking accent. They have a lot of spoken, they could have a great conversation. And they say, well, this child, they've just come from Hong Kong, they should fit perfectly fine into our Canadian school in Canada or in the UK. And actually, what is so amazing about Hong Kong is that our schools here, any of our schools, that we spend a lot of time and resources investing into bilingual or multilingual languages. And quite often children that end up in these countries, they go through assessments, and they get, as some research will suggest, that a lot of them actually get misdiagnosed, saying that they might have dyslexia or a learning difficulty, where in fact, they've just been grouped with a bunch of children that have got a whole lot more academic language. They're great with their spoken language, but the academic language is the problem. So I know our UGO team, working with universities, have really tried to encourage families in Hong Kong to stay in Hong Kong, because we are experts in Hong Kong at our schools, and I can speak for YCS, at helping children develop not only the casual chats, but the academic language, preparing them to be able to move through. So the key thing that came out from everyone else speaking is valuing. That's the key word, is that whatever school you choose for your children, you need to make sure that they are valued as a multilingual learner. And we know that when children feel valued and they feel safe, that they don't have the anxiety, they feel more comfortable trying to communicate. And I mean, I can speak for ages about us in the early childhood, in how we start from 6 months of age. And we know that later on, I'll actually save some of this for later on, I know that some more questions, but children feeling safe is such a great platform to be able to develop language. I'll leave it at that. We could carry on chatting for ages.
I'm sure we'll get there eventually.
Douglas?
Yes.
May I throw in a rider there? You asked about the role of the school, so I'll give you a little trick. That when I was head of FIS, what we used to do for our senior students, that's year 13, and they were applying to universities. So we would say to them, because they had to meet the adjudicator somewhere in Hong Kong and have a little interview. So we'd say, right, when you go to the interview, take your laptop, and then you show them, say, what kind of person are you? Are you ready for Oxford? Are you ready for university? You show them your student CV in English, and you explain it. Then we said, after that, you show them your CV in Latin, because that was one of the languages of the French school. Then you say, and you taught them through it. Then you show them your CV in French, and then you show it in English. And all the students said, wow, they were so impressed. Well, it's so fantastic. This is me on paper and talking in Latin or French about myself. And that's part of the value of languages, and the role of school is to get kids confident about enjoying languages and be motivated to want to either study it further or show universities, if that's their choice, that they are international people and everybody gets in. Sorry about that,
No.
You've got.
No, I was going to say, I think it may be a future question, but everybody probably will comment. I think the most important thing that I always talk to, particularly the parents of the younger students, is this understanding that it is wonderful to be multilingual, but you actually need a core language. You need one language that is your language, that is strong. I mean, when you go into also different aspects of bilingual theory, acquisition theory and stuff, if you know several languages okay, you don't have the main language at which you get the rich, like, quality vocabulary, the adjectives. If you know nice and simple words like that in French, German, Spanish, Chinese, whatever, that's okay. But if you don't know beautiful, amazing, marvelous, because those are the words that they transfer to their new languages. And I think some of us who have been in Hong Kong a long time will remember, for example, just before 97, when a lot of Hong Kong families left to take their children to Canada or Australia to get a passport, then they came back with the passport. Now, those children had some English. They'd forgotten some of their Cantonese because they weren't with their grandparents and family. So they actually came back into an international school or an English-speaking school, because that's where they'd been. And all of a sudden you realize, actually, they have a bit of some languages, but they didn't have the strong, almost like we call it the skeleton, the strong one that you hang all those other vocabulary, the understanding of reading and all that kind of thing. So I think the most important thing is to make sure your children have a strong language, and then you can transfer that into other languages as well. You're both nodding, so I presume you're both agree.
Yeah, sorry, we're going to jump in on that, because there's such a great point there, and I think now, sorry, Douglas, we're taking you off, but these are great conversations, is that sometimes we have families that they speak Cantonese as a mother tongue, and they want their child to learn English. And this would be a great example that Mr. Walton's brought up there, is that it would be a shame if that parent tried to speak broken English and the child was raised without a mother tongue. That's a really good example. What we do find, though, in Hong Kong, and we do a lot of work with our schools in China mainland. Obviously, YCS is an organization with many schools from Shanghai, Beijing. And something that we find is that while we run the same programs, is something that is really interesting about Hong Kong context is that we have got caregivers in our homes that speak English. Most families have somebody that's come out from the Philippines, and that's a source of another mother tongue inside the classrooms. We find with our schools in Shanghai that from 6 months of age, we're doing the same program, but the caregivers there are speaking Mandarin. So what's really interesting about our environment, and we know that research says that children that have got a stable, consistent person that's speaking the language all the time at home, they can actually be raised with more than one mother tongue language. So for us, the way that we respond to that is that we have in our classrooms an English teacher and a Cantonese teacher that are in the classroom all the time with equal authority, so that we really anchor into both of those languages that are at home. And we find that our children then are really gaining this mother tongue in English and mother tongue in Cantonese. It might look different. That's for different families. We have some families that come from Mandarin background. We have some families that have chosen not to have a helper. But I'm just saying that largely that is the case. And that is something that's so unique about Hong Kong. And I think quite often we do a lot of work with our caregivers in Hong Kong because we really value the role that they play in families, and language is one of those significant roles.
Yes, I can agree to this. I think it is essential that we as parents are authentic. So I would never speak English with my kids because my first language is German. I would in certain circumstances. So if I meet people who don't speak German, of course, we would all then switch to English. But just amongst ourselves, we would speak German because, that's essential. We have to be authentic, and the kids have to have that one first language. Yes, and I think this is for some children who grow up multilingually, whose parents have different first languages, and maybe grandparents even another first language, that might be a bit confusing. But if they have someone to rely on, and if every of those parents and grandparents stick to their first language, I think then it can work.
Sure, I agree with you. And one of the questions as principal I'm asked by new families coming to school is they have had a basic education in Cantonese and a little bit of English. Are they okay to come to your school? Can they get into your school? And we say, we'll say our assessment is in English. But we then ask them to choose about Chinese, because that will be the second language. And then we get the issue of what Chinese is it? Is it traditional? Is it simplified? Is it foreign? So as a school, we take the interest to see what their first language is, which is Cantonese. Second language may be English. And then we will say, for schooling, you've chosen to come to our school. We'll turn the language around. So all the lessons will be in English, and we will still offer Chinese, Spanish, and Korean. So we are still encouraging students to have that. I used to say your first level would be English. On top of English, we would layer Chinese, because English is phonics, Chinese is tones, so they're very different. And then Korean is also tones. And then lastly, Spanish. Spanish is very similar to French and is based in phonics. So we explain that to parents right from the beginning, that there are different ways of working in languages, different ways to study, different ways to pick up on the nuances of the language. And that's very important, because as I say to all the students, you are going to study. Right? I'm not going to do it for you. Your teacher, you have to do the study, right from the beginning. Did you want to add to that?
No, I was going to say, I think the final thing is, certainly from a parental perspective, is that, do we need it? They can't hear me. I'm sure they can. Is that many of the different schools in Hong Kong, we fully understand that the children actually potentially only use English, in my case, when they're at school.
Yeah.
And we don't see that as a deficit. We actually see that as something that is positive, because we are encouraging parents to use, as you say, rich quality language of their own language, and many of them will go to grandparents, etc., who are using different languages. So it's not a problem to us. In actual fact, it's one of those things that we would say, no, it's going to enhance them as a learner and in different ways. So when the parents come on their first time and say, we don't speak very good English, is that a problem? We tend to say, no, it's not a problem.
Is there a danger that you can overload children with too many languages? Like, for instance, if mum speaks Cantonese, dad speaks Mandarin, helper speaks English, grandparents, say, speak Hokkien, like another dialect. Can that be overwhelming for a child? And can that be can it hinder them?
I would say, in my experience, certainly here in Hong Kong, some children can do it. Some children struggle. And I think that's when, as a family, you make the very strong decision, what is your home language or your native tongue or mother tongue. So you actually have, like we said, go back to the skeleton, you have the strong language. And everything else can come off that, but you need that one. No, we have a lot of parents where, you can read on an application form, mother is using this language with the children, father is using this language with the children. That's totally normal for many, many of our families.
Yeah, so I come from a slightly different context, because we're the early years. So we're starting with families from 6 months of age. And I can tell you that all of our Chinese families, by the time that they're inside primary school, so they've been with us probably a lot of children from 6 months, but most from 2 years of age. By the time they go to primary school, every single one of our children can speak Cantonese, Mandarin, and English. And again, the reason is because the Cantonese is a home language. Hong Kong, we've got caregivers at home speaking English, so that's an anchor. And we have, from the school environment, a very strong program to transition children from the Cantonese to the Mandarin. Now, for our Western families, like my daughter's at our school, it's definitely more challenging, because my daughter comes home, there's nobody at home speaking Cantonese or Mandarin. So again, going back to Simon's point about an anchor, I only have one anchor in my home, but most of you have got 2 anchors or maybe 3 anchors in your home. So your children are at a great advantage. Just one more point on the early childhood is that we know that children, when they're in the mother's womb, are gaining the ability to differentiate different sounds. We know that children, for the first 3 years of their lives, are at a very critical point where they're able to pick up different sounds which help with picking up different languages. So while, to answer the question, if a child arrives in a primary school or secondary school setting and they're wanting to learn many different languages, it's probably going to be more challenging for them at that age. But a child that's arriving with us at 2 years of age, their brain is a sponge at that time of their life, and they're just absorbing it and they're taking it in. So for any families that are really looking for their child to be able to grow up with multilingual, it's going back to that point, what anchors do you have in your home? And then are you starting really early? Because the first 3 years are going to give them a significant head start.
I would agree with that, especially the early years, neuroplasty they call it, when the brain is able to absorb so much. And my son with my granddaughter, so at home he speaks English. His wife speaks Cantonese, and at her school she learns Putonghua, Mandarin, right? She's 6. It's 3 languages, and she's been doing that since she was able to work in languages. And she talks to me in English and Putonghua, and she says, "Oh, Granddad, you don't know the answer." And I say, "No." I said, "You tell me, what do I need to learn?" And she will do the part of the sentence in English and then give the answer in Mandarin, right? And if she's stuck for a word, when she's talking in Cantonese, she might insert the word in English, or she might insert the word in Putonghua. So she's gaining language acquisition in 3 languages. This is fantastic. This is how it should be. I have many Indian families, and their kids are so good at picking up other languages easily, quickly. And it said the good thing is that where she moves through the school, and she's at Chung anyway, so I'll find out whether she's what other languages. And one thing we haven't talked about is the need for our young students as they grow through our schools is language choice for exams. Right? How, if they enjoy the languages, can they choose to do those languages in IGCSE, A-level, or IB? IB you must choose anyway. But what happens if you don't have a language for IB? They insert something called ab initio where you can do it. But for A-level, you don't have to choose a language. But I try to encourage all the students to at least do AS level Chinese, because it only takes 7 weeks. And it's done. And there's no pressure from families to get them through Chinese. It's straightforward. So the importance is the early years, very early, get that brain going and seeping in all that lovely phonics and tones, and then ask them how they want to use those languages for IGCSE, and then if they want to go to universities, how to explore that further. Would you agree with that?
I would, yes. I would. I think I'd like to come back to the aspect of the individual child and the background. Of course, it's in a place like Hong Kong and with families that are multilingual. That's a big advantage, and it makes it very easy for young children to start learning different languages. But it might not be in other places in the world. Like my children who were born in Munich in Germany. Of course, Munich is also a kind of international city, but the education system is not that international. And so my younger daughter now, who's in primary, she is learning English and Mandarin at school, and it's amazing how fast she picks it up. Although she's already 10 years old now, but it's young enough to really get started. And I'm amazed how much she can already say in Mandarin. It's really fantastic. But I think that's exactly the point. The earlier you can start, if you have the chance and the circumstances from the place where you live and the schools that you can enroll your child in, then you should take these chances, really.
Everyone here is a parent. What tips can we give the audience as a parent for helping raise your child bilingually or multilingually? Is it as simple as build that skeleton, speaking the mother tongue, or what else can we suggest? Who wants to take this on?
For me, I get asked this question by parents a lot. They say, "Oh, we don't speak Mandarin at home. How can we help? We don't speak Spanish at home. What can we do?" And I said, "Well, when my daughter was doing IGCSE biology, I couldn't help her with the biology because I didn't know about Eugenia and the Spiragyra and all this kind of stuff." And they said, "But what you do as a parent is support." And you say, "Kelly, I don't quite know about the level of French homework you've got here or the Mandarin, but I'll sit with you and we'll do it together." And homework is based from schoolwork. So we'll have our school book there to look at what you've been studying and see how it goes. And then she would go, "Oh, yeah, okay, fine." So we go back and she would do the homework based from school and it will be okay. So the role of parent is, if you don't know the language and you can't work in it, is to support your child. I had the opportunity because it was late evening, and so I could sit with her, right? Some of the parents of primary kids, you may not be able to have that opportunity. But some parents then say, "Okay, let's do tuition. Let's send them off to a tutor." And, you have to be careful with that option because it can overload the language and the kid. So my advice is support where you can. Try your best. Just by being in the room may be enough to say, "Okay, tell me your problem. Okay, I don't know the answer to this, but let's go and research it together." Okay? Is that what you're going to say? No.
No. No, I think it is, of course, because we're talking generally as well. And the interesting thing as a parent is, yeah, you're right. It goes back to this role model thing, I think, as well. I suppose in my family, I have 2 boys, and basically they were born in Hong Kong, etc. And their Cantonese is okay because they went to school here. They can do taxis, they can do train. Well, their language at home was English. When it came to studying Mandarin, I think one of the things that I learned as a parent was to really advocate and stick for your own child, because it's the only time that I've ever had a major disagreement with a school, and it wasn't my school, whereby my son was the only international student in the Chinese middle group at his secondary school. And we went to a parents' evening, and this Chinese teacher said, his characters are too ugly. And I sat and I looked this person in the face and I said, but he's trying so hard. And so are we with him. And it's that moment when you think, no, hang on, I'm in it with my child here, and I'm going to stick to it. And we put him in the group, and eventually he went, I'm going to do French because it's easier. And you think, there is a kid born in Hong Kong, trying his hardest to speak Mandarin, and the teacher went, psh, so he went and did French. And you think, oh, what a waste of time. Anyway, he's interesting because he's left university and he's just whatever. And he wrote to me about a month ago and said, Dad, I'm going to take night school Mandarin. And I said, why? He said, because it's going to be good for my job. And I went, yes. So it does come around. But push, sometimes as schools, we get pushed by certain things with certain parents. And there are sometimes, as a parent, what is actually right. And it's right for your child. And there are some times when you've just got to keep pushing and saying, no, my kid deserves to be in that group, please. And they shouldn't leave Mandarin and do French.
Would you like to speak?
Yes, just to add, when it comes to overloading and motivation and the role of parents, I think it's really important to bear in mind if kids are motivated because they have they don't feel too much pressure. It's rather the motivation that they have because of the language itself that they learn and the fun they have by learning it, right? Because they see they can communicate easily and so on. That helps the learning. So that is an important aspect of learning. And when we look at parents' roles, of course, yes, there has to be a lot of support. But I would suggest mostly regarding the organization of when to do which homework tasks, and if some children are far more independent and better in self-organization than others, these are the things where parents play a very important role. But I agree. I think it's not essential that you speak the language or that you revise everything in detail with your children. It's important that you just give them the support that is necessary and try to make them independent and working on their self-organization. That is very important, I think.
Yeah, I'll just wrap this up with a completely different angle, where this is a story from our primary school, and one of our parents shared the story with us. So a child was in a biology class, and they were learning about compost, and the child went home, and the mum was asking, so what do you learn at school today in biology? And the child just could not remember the word compost, and he went through this explanation, saying we have a big patch and we throw all the old vegetables and we throw everything inside there, and then it kind of turns into this thing that you can throw in the garden. He's talking like that because he didn't have all the language. And the mum responded to him in her mother tongue, Cantonese. The mum's English wasn't that great, but she's obviously mother tongue in Cantonese. And she said compost in Cantonese. And all of a sudden, the child's understanding came alive because he said, oh, that's what Grandpa does on the farm. That's exactly what it is. And the point of the story is that your mother tongue is really important because it can connect to the experiences that the child has had in, say, an English class in biology. The child went back and could speak to the teachers saying, I know all about compost. My grandfather does this at home. And if the mother had tried to engage that conversation in her broken English, that whole learning opportunity might have been missed out on. So your mother tongue is valuable as well.
I'll ask one more question and then we'll open it up to the audience. Does it matter, when if a child starts mixing languages from mixing words, from different languages that they're learning as they grow up? Is that something to be worried about and avoided, or is it just a natural part of the learning process?
Anyone?
I would say for me, it's completely natural. I mean, at school myself, I had to do French and German. All right, so yeah, I can still listen to it, but if I'm in France trying to speak French, there are Cantonese words that come, and there are English words, and there are German words, and that's just life. Yeah, I think that it's the element of sorting the language and then prioritizing. The students and the children do it themselves as they go into different contexts. That's absolutely true. Yeah. Actually, I'll just show you a very, very funny example as to how language. Doris, can I borrow your piece of paper? Because it was this literally only about a few days ago. So I was interviewing a child, really, really struggling. We were sitting on the floor playing. Can you hear me? We were sitting on the floor playing different games and whatever. And we were playing with some numbers, all right? And I'd sort of got him to just show me, he was 6, that he could do some different numbers, and he'd written a few numbers. And I said to him, oh, just underneath the number 6, could you put a number 4? And I thought, this is not a difficult question. And okay, I said to the little boys now, I said, just can you put the number 4 underneath the number 6? And this is what he did. 4. His number 6 was here, and he put the number 4 underneath the number 6, which was exactly what I asked him to do. But his context was, and he literally put the number 4 exactly underneath the number 6. So that's when they get their understanding, they get their different contexts, and you understand how they're processing language, and you thought, yeah, great.
I would like to add that it doesn't really matter. It doesn't matter at all if a child mixes up the languages, and quite the contrary. If someone makes a mistake, mistakes are so important in the learning process. So you learn from your mistakes, and you gain your awareness when it comes to the fine nuances in each language, because maybe you use a word in a certain context, but it's not the right choice actually, or maybe it's slightly the wrong choice. There could have been a better word to use, and that's exactly where you learn from, and that's why it's important to make mistakes for the learning process.
I would wholeheartedly agree with that, and I say to parents, remember this word, fail, F-A-I-L. Remember this word, because basically for schools it means first attempt in learning. First attempt in learning, right? You've not heard that before? Oh, okay. So what it was saying is kids make mistakes. They do. Or they're trying for something and they make a mistake. They can't remember the word in Chinese, so they put an English word in, right? But it's an attempt in learning. It's an attempt to try and get it right and prove that they are having a go at the language. And that is so important. First attempt in learning, right? There might be a second attempt in it, but it doesn't fit the sentence, the word. But have a think about that. Fail. It's not a fail. It's an attempt in learning, and it's the same in language, isn't it? The kids. It's a lot of repetition. As we don't do the dictations that local schools do. We don't do that hard graft of Chinese, because we encourage them to express themselves in the language. And if they make a mistake, we don't beat the table with a ruler. We encourage them. What can you try that one again? What other word can we put there? So fail is very important.
Any questions from the audience then? I don't know if we have a microphone or just... Great, thank you.
I have a question. I have a 1-year-old daughter and trying to learn the basic 3 languages and at the same time in my family, Mandarin and Cantonese and English. I have a question because many of you mentioned this sort of overloading risk while doing this kind of experiment. I wonder if some of you can share a little bit how to tell the signs of overloading and, for example, they are not progressing in their core language as quickly as should be, and what the parents can do for this kind of thing. Thank you.
Yeah, I'll go there first because I'm part of the ECE section. So language can be learned really in 2 ways. The first is acquisition, which is naturally from the environment. So children pick up, like we've said earlier, the word sponge, where they're absorbing language because it's happening all around them. There's very little stress that happens when, if you're speaking Mandarin, your caregiver speaking English, and mum speaking Cantonese, for example. They come to school and they have teachers that are speaking these languages. Their classmates are speaking these languages. We at YCS, we really believe in a language-rich environment. So we say we have access to both languages 100% all the time. Now, the stress can really come where you start taking the approach of taught language as opposed to acquisition, where you start sending your children to tutor centers where they have to sit down, they have workbooks, they are having to try and memorize vocabulary. Now, you can see it's really different now. If the child is sat down, they have to try and memorize all this vocabulary. That's going to become stressful. It can create anxiety. You contrast that to a child who's got these strong relationships with anchor people. They've got a strong relationship with the English teacher in the classroom, the Chinese teacher in the classroom. They don't even know that they're learning, but it's just happening so naturally. We always say that one of our biggest challenges is that at the end of the day, children don't want to leave school because they're having such a great time. They've made these incredible relationships with parents and children. And the parents are trying to coax them to, it's time to go, we really have to leave the campus now. And I think that environment takes away all the anxiety and pressure. So we say to families, please avoid going to tutor centers and to all of that. You can keep those for much later on in life. But for the early years, there's focus on relationships and language acquisition, creating opportunities for children to speak.
I think as a parent as well, one of the other areas that you sometimes have discussions with parents in is this notion that I may in my office, for example, get a parent who says, but my child won't speak to me in Chinese. They only speak to me in English. And that is a tense situation for some families. But in some respects, I sometimes put that back to the family and say, but you created this because you wanted it. You've offered them that choice. And they will come back to your language because they understand every single word that you say. But they reply to you in English, not in Putonghua or Mandarin or French or German. And I think sometimes as a family, you've got to almost take a step back, not create the stress, because language will develop. It absolutely will develop in many different ways. But you may have to accept some difficult choices or possibilities along the way if the child is not necessarily rejecting your language, but is choosing to respond to you in a different one. And as I say, I think that happens not for every family, but it is quite common. And as I say, I get anxious parents saying, but they won't use it with me. And that's absolutely true. And that's going to happen to many, many families. And as I say, you've got to sort of say, okay, this is fine. This is a stage. This is a phase. To clearly speak to the grandparents politely using that language, So there will be little bit hiccups along your journey. But to be honest, the vast majority of us will say that there are many, many children who are coping quite happily with a Hong Kong trilingual environment, and they go on to do great things.
My advice would be to not let you or your wife stress too much about it. Honestly, okay, you say that your child is 1 year old. Relax, man. Just relax with it. Okay, it will come. It will come, right? Because if you're stressed, your child will pick those vibes up. All right, so just try and ease back a bit. But as Clayton said, it's the man in the grey suit, right? It's the environment, right? But don't suddenly say, answer me in Cantonese, right? Because that will scare them off, right? Frighten them. It's a 1 year old, right? You want them to grow with that language-rich environment, right? And they will do. But just keep it up. But don't try and put pressure on, especially wives. Wives can, be worried. Oh, I know. Well, it's because when they come to school, it's mainly the mums who bring the kids, and they said, "Oh, we can't do this. He hasn't done that. He's not a very good boy, right?" And I said, let it go, right? Just relax back, right? Don't stress and don't rush to put him into a tuition centre. Honestly, please don't rush to do that, right? Just relax and keep that lovely language environment that you've got going now. Just slowly mellow it a bit.
An interesting one. An interesting one for a parent to consider as well is, what is the language that your children play in? When you listen to them play in their own room or with brothers and sisters, there's a language there. And another question that you can actually put to them as they get a little bit older is, what language do you dream in?
Yeah.
Because a lot of language theory will tell you that the language that you dream in is actually your language.
First language.
Yeah. And as I say, just with younger children, the language that they play in, all right, the language that they dream in.
One of my old tutors used to say to us, the quickest way to learn about what's the child's first language is to hit them on the thumb with a hammer. Right? Because they will scream out in a language. They'll say, "Oh no," or curse in a language. And that's the first language.
Yeah.
Okay, that's extreme.
Don't do that.
There are many other ways.
All right, we'll try and take one more question then. Anyone else?
Hi, thank you. Following the questions from the other audience, it just remind me of my own questions because I got two helpers at home. So at home, we speak to our also 1-year-old, my daughter in Cantonese and English. But between the helper, both of them accompany her most of the day because we are both have to work full time. They speak in their, obviously, it's their mother tongue, the home language. And I started to notice. Maybe I'm the stressful and very kind of mom, but she only started saying like mom and dad like recently, like when she's like 1 year old. Well, at the meantime, when I go online and research on it, I say, oh, most children can say papa and mama like 6, or 8 months or so. Should I be concerned? Because I don't want to tell my helper to say, oh no, you can't speak your home language at home. You have to speak English between the two of you. But I really don't want to do that. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm sure everyone's jumping at this because this is a really important point, and we all have the answers that children that are picking up many languages, they can have vocabulary. So a lot of the research that you would have looked at is probably somebody like myself. I speak one language, and I probably picked it up a lot sooner than children that are trying to pick up many languages. So you don't have to worry. There's actually research will suggest that children can have probably many months of absorbing before they actually start sharing the language. So if they're trying to pick up many languages, there's no need to worry at all. You can just carry on doing what you're doing. Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's nothing much more to add, but it's actually true. For children who grow up in a multilingual environment, often they start speaking a bit later. But yeah, it's exactly the point, because they absorb the different languages and it takes time. But then they will start speaking, and yeah, there's no reason to worry.
Yeah, I would echo my colleagues' comments. My grandson my granddaughter is proficient in 3 languages, but my grandson, similar to yours, is very young and is not saying any words in any language at the moment. And my son and his wife are very worried, and they say, what should we do? Should we take him to a specialist? Should we take him to a speech therapist? Should we take him to a occupational therapist? Should we get him tested? I said, relax. Just keep it calm, right? And it will come. He will come, right? And as Simon said, the play aspect, the socializing, the play will bring the languages out. Honestly, it will do, right? But don't stress on it too much. I know as parents we do think, oh no, he's not, especially for boys. People say about boys haven't got the language by 2, there's a problem. It's not true. right? Everybody's different. And so you have to just relax. It's tough because all the other families you'll hear about say, oh, but he was reading by 1, and he was swimming the channel by the age of 2, right? Ignore, all right? It's your son, it's your child, all right?
Final thoughts, yeah.
I'm going to say, the one thing that we haven't actually talked about is how bilingual sort of understanding and theory, has changed, and particularly in Hong Kong schools, as somebody who's worked in many schools for quite many years. When I first arrived in Hong Kong, we were not allowed to in an English-speaking classroom, you couldn't let the children use any other language. And you were actively told by your senior teachers, tell them off. Now, that has completely changed because our understanding of what language is. So you will find in lots of situations now where children are what we tend to call trans-languaging, that they may be working with a partner in their own language, but when they present to the other children, they speak English, because that's the language that unifies us in this classroom. But I think gone are the days when children are told off for using the wrong language, because we understand so much more about how we learn language and acquire language.
Yeah, that's great. Sorry, we're all out of time now, so we've got to wrap it up. So thank you to our panelists for coming, and you too.